In the autumn of 2008, the world went into a dramatic financial crisis. When banks collapsed, billions were wiped off share values, and governments had to bail out their financial systems to try and keep them afloat. At that time, we were in the middle of the Carnegie inquiry into the future of civil society, and the crisis prompted us to ask really fundamental questions about where our economy was going and what needed to be done to stop crises like this happening again. And one of the first things we noticed was that those organisations which were most rooted in their communities and in society and in values had actually weathered the crisis better. These included the building societies which hadn't been privatised, cooperatives, social enterprises and charities. And these were all hit by the crisis, but nothing like as badly as the very commercial banks and investment houses. This made us look back at history in a new way. And if we go back to the Industrial Revolution, what's very striking about Britain and Ireland was how important civil society was to economic life. The very first building society, created in Birmingham in the 1770s, led the way to a movement which at one point provided 90% of all mortgages in the UK. The co-ops, invented in the 1840s, have become a worldwide movement. And yet, during the 20th century, much of that civil economy had been pushed to the sides, partly by big business and partly by the big state. And we asked the question, perhaps we need a more pluralist, more balanced economy to prevent crises like 2008 happening again. Perhaps we need to reinforce an economy more founded on values as well as value, more pluralist in its economic forms. In the report, Making Good Society, we made a series of recommendations about what could be done. We looked at ways of strengthening local economic activity so that if you have assets, you can ensure that your savings are put into local investment trusts, community investment trusts, where they're creating jobs and wealth in your community, not simply on a distant global market. We look at the role that civil society can play, as it did in the past, in creating financial products better suited to today's needs. Things like flexible mortgages, which can adjust if you lose your job, green ISAs, which can contribute to the environment, or micro-insurance. We look at how civil society itself can become a player with its own economic power. Civil society organisations, between them, sit on huge assets, 66 billion in the hands of charities, huge sums in the hands of churches, mosques and temples. And we argue they should be using this wealth not just to make a return on the market, but also to advance their own values, to invest in social enterprises, in ways of reducing climate change, in strengthening communities, not just turning a profit. And finally, we look at all the ways in which citizens could be exercising their own power in the economy more effectively. Remember, most of the money in pension funds and insurance funds is our money, but we very rarely exercise influence on the decisions made about that money. Whether a takeover should go ahead, whether a company acts in ways which are healthy for the environment or not. And there's a growing set of campaigns coming from faith organisations and trade unions and charities arguing that we need to reintegrate us as citizens and the money which we've created, which we've earned and which we've put into these funds. All of this really is arguing for making our economy more civil, integrating our values, our social concerns, our environmental concerns into the way in which decisions are made. And we think that's not just good for society, that's almost certainly also good for our economy. It will make it more resilient, saner, less vulnerable to the kinds of out-of-control risks which caused the crash in the first place. And we'll be looking to see which governments, which foundations, which large businesses get this and change their policies and change their behaviour in this direction, rather than simply seeing the crisis as an aberration and trying to get back to business as usual as fast as they can.